For the first time in human history, a generation has grown up entirely inside the digital age. Generation Z, roughly born between 1997 and 2012, did not adapt to technology. Technology shaped their psychological development from childhood. To understand Gen Z psychology, researchers are not simply studying a new generation, they're studying a new human environment. Because psychology is never created in isolation, it evolves with culture, economy, and technology. The digital childhood experiment. Developmental psychologists describe Gen Z as the first participants in what some researchers call a global digital childhood experiment. Unlike millennials who remember life before smartphones, Gen Z encountered screens during early brain development. Research published by developmental psychologist Jean Twenge analyzed large datasets from U.S. adolescents and found a major behavioral shift beginning around 2012, the year smartphone adoption accelerated globally. Teenagers began spending significantly less time in face-to-face social interaction and more time online. This environmental change altered how social identity forms. Traditionally, identity developed through physical communities, schools, neighborhoods, and peer groups. Gen Z builds identity in both physical and digital environments simultaneously. Psychologists now call this dual identity formation. They are not only who they are offline, they are also who they are online. The psychology of constant comparison. One of the most studied discoveries about Gen Z involves social comparison. Social psychologist Leon Festinger's comparison theory suggests humans evaluate themselves by comparing with others. But previous generations compared locally. Gen Z compares globally. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that continuous exposure to curated online lives increases self-evaluation frequency. Instead of occasional comparison, Gen Z experiences continuous comparison. The brain never receives a break from evaluation. This contributes to higher reported levels of anxiety and self-doubt, not because Gen Z is weaker, but because their psychological environment contains constant social feedback. Emotional awareness and mental health literacy. Despite challenges, researchers consistently find that Gen Z demonstrates unusually high emotional awareness. A national APA survey reported that Gen Z openly discusses stress, therapy, and emotional well-being at significantly higher rates than older generations did at the same age. Psychologists interpret this as a cultural shift toward emotional literacy. Earlier generations were trained for emotional endurance. Gen Z is trained for emotional understanding. They recognize psychological language, burnout, boundaries, trauma, self-care. This represents one of the largest changes in modern psychological culture. Mental health moved from private struggle to public conversation. The anxiety paradox. However, research also reveals a paradox. Gen Z reports higher anxiety levels compared to previous generations. Multiple studies link this to three major factors: uncertainty, information overload, and performance pressure. Economic research shows Gen Z entered adulthood during financial instability, global crises, and rapid job market transformation. The traditional life roadmap became less predictable. Psychologically, uncertainty activates the brain's threat detection system. When the future feels unstable, the brain increases monitoring behavior. This manifests as overthinking, caution, and stress sensitivity. Anxiety becomes an adaptive response to unpredictability. Attention and cognitive change. Neuroscience research suggests digital environments may influence attention patterns. Studies from cognitive science institutions show that frequent exposure to fast-paced digital content strengthens rapid information switching. Gen Z processes information quickly, multitasks efficiently, and adapts rapidly to new platforms. However, sustained attention may become more challenging. Psychologists describe this not as reduced intelligence, but as adaptive cognition. Their brains evolved for speed rather than duration. They are optimized for dynamic environments. Relationship psychology and authenticity. Another major discovery involves trust. Gen Z shows lower automatic trust in institutions compared to older generations. Political scientists and psychologists attribute this to growing up during public institutional failures and transparent online criticism. Authority is no longer accepted automatically. Authenticity replaces hierarchy. Research in consumer psychology shows Gen Z prefers individuals over corporations and personal storytelling over formal messaging. They respond to perceived realness. Psychologically, this reflects a movement from authority-based trust to authenticity-based trust. Purpose over stability. Career psychology studies reveal a shift in motivation. Where previous generations prioritized job security, Gen Z shows stronger preference for meaningful work and flexible lifestyles. Research from workplace psychology surveys indicates Gen Z values autonomy, creativity, and mental well-being alongside income. This is sometimes misinterpreted as lack of work ethic, but psychological analysis suggests adaptation. In uncertain environments, flexibility feels safer than permanence. Their goal is not simply employment, it is alignment between identity and work. The identity exploration era. Developmental theory describes young adulthood as a period of identity exploration. For Gen Z, this phase has expanded. Sociological research suggests identity exploration lasts longer due to increased options and delayed traditional milestones. Education paths, career options, lifestyles, and social roles multiplied dramatically. Psychologists call this extended identity formation. Gen Z experiments more before committing. This creates creativity and innovation, but also decision fatigue. Too many possible lives can make choosing one difficult. Strengths emerging from research. Despite public criticism, psychological research highlights strong traits emerging within Gen Z: high adaptability, technological fluency, social awareness, inclusivity, global perspective. They're comfortable with diversity, rapid change, and interdisciplinary thinking. In many ways, they're psychologically prepared for a world defined by transformation. The larger psychological meaning. Every generation reflects the conditions that shaped it. Gen Z is not simply different, it is the first generation raised during permanent connectivity. Their psychology reveals how human minds adapt when technology, information, and uncertainty become constant. They are navigating a world without clear historical precedent, and their behaviors, anxiety, awareness, adaptability, and desire for meaning are not contradictions. They are responses. Understanding Gen Z is not about labeling them, it is about observing human evolution in real time. Because as environments change, human psychology changes with them. And Gen Z may represent the first glimpse of how future generations will think, work, and relate to the world. If this video expanded your understanding of Gen Z psychology, share it with someone interested in human behavior. And comment, "Psychology evolves with generations."